Thanks everyone for coming out tonight. We're going to get started right on time, and welcome to the people on the Zoom call as well. My name is Michael Alimo. I'm the president of USA Financial and Tax Services. Appreciate you coming out tonight. The lovely couple that came in first, or someone else I was talking to. Feels pretty good outside, right? Imagine you're saying that when it's 22 degrees. But most people go, yeah, it's not so bad right now. So it'll get worse this weekend, I hear. Tonight, we're going to talk about a topic which I have actually just started this topic. And the topic is kind of reflective of my company as well, actually. And so we call this one Full Circle Financial Planning, where we're going to talk about a little section each, a little blurb on each section here: retirement planning, insurance strategies. Welcome. There's handouts on the back. Tax efficiency and estate planning. And you'll see in a minute, that's really the design of the company when I created it about 25 years ago. And we have this tagline here: helping American families achieve a successful retirement. I currently have offices in Glastonbury, Cheshire, Madison, Southbury, which I just came from, right on Main Street there, and Shelton and Windsor as well. Briefly, it's an educational workshop for general information purposes only. It's not intended as advice or recommendations for a simple reason. Everything you're going to see here is factual and up to date, which is good and important for you, specifically when we talk about taxes. But a lot of the case studies you're going to see here are specific to people's needs at their point in time in their life. So if you like these concepts, you feel they're appropriate for you, if you work with another advisor or a CPA, just make sure that they're appropriate for you. Losing my voice a little bit. In the packets there, some really good information that you can read about on these various topics. My biography's in there as well. Helen, if you'd like to leave, for me to leave a few handouts for you for the people online, I'm happy to do that as well. And inside, if you're interested at the end, you decide you'd like to come in and see me, feel free to fill out the evaluation form. You can hand that to me at the end. I always like to start with a few financial quotes to help you understand where I see a lot of these things here. First one, P.T. Barnum: money is a terrible master, but an excellent servant. And it's amazing how money can actually become your servant if you're feeling uncomfortable and you have stress when it comes to actually having it. Woody Allen stated not too long ago, and it's interesting based on the situation that he's in right now, whatever excuses you may have for not buying life insurance will only sound ridiculous to your widow. Mark Twain, long time ago, said, what is the difference between a taxidermist and a tax collector? The taxidermist only takes your skin. And lastly, Shay Christopher: if you do not have a will or a plan for your estate, then the government has one for you. So these are kind of all a little bit that we're going to talk about in the money world here. I was at a symposium about 2 years ago in Colorado, so if you think it gets cold here, I lived there for 3 years. You can get pretty rough there in Denver as well. I used to live actually in the mountains, in the ski mountains. And at this symposium, it was really interesting, and it kind of, again, fits to how I designed this company. And the question they posed to about 1,500 people across the country is, what is the consumer's expectations when they engage with a financial services company? And of course, you all looked for investment management if you were looking for a firm. And the good news is almost 90% of the firms actually offered that to you. I'm curious what the other 10% of financial firms did if they didn't offer you investment advice. Estate planning, we do a lot of estate planning. I'll explain that to you in a minute, but I probably spend about 200 hours a year in various estate planning meetings in conjunction with other estate attorneys. But most of the public were hoping to get that from the financial services company, but only 22% of firms actually offered it. Tax planning, we have a tax advisory service and a tax planning service, and about 25% of the firms out there offered it to the public, even though, again, 90% of you folks wanted that. And then back to insurance, they needed to understand long-term care insurance, life insurance. You know, I say with people today, you know, there's a lot of people don't need life insurance any longer. There are people who should have bought it 20 years ago. So in the insurance world, you have to evaluate it no different than an investment, quite honestly. And so our company vision, for many years, I've asked people, when is the last time these four persons, if you have them in your life, have gotten together on your behalf at the same time to coordinate efforts? And I'll give you an example of each one here. An estate planner, again, I work with quite a few of the estate attorneys, and their goal is to try to protect your money now while you're alive and pass it on, but it's a monetary decision. An insurance agent is always an easy person to pick on in this scenario because they'll look at you and say, you need $1 million of life insurance, and you need an annuity, and you need a long-term care policy. And they might actually be right, but if all they do is sell insurance and don't know the rest of your financial picture, maybe they're kind of overselling it a little bit. A financial planner or a money manager, we manage a lot of money for people. We want to invest your money, get paid, and hopefully it goes up. And historically, 8 out of every 10 years, that's exactly what the stock market does. It's the 2 in the 10 years you're wondering if you're in the right place, if all they're doing is managing your money. And then lastly, the accountant, which we're coming on now. And I call myself a tax advisor. I used to do all the tax returns myself many years ago. An accountant or a CPA is really just preparing last year's story. They're going to do your tax return, and your question is, do I get money back, or how much do I have to pay? In the tax advisory business, we're improving people's tax picture over their lifetime. And so that's kind of the structure of my company, and we call it a full circle advisor approach, where we integrate those concepts into one company. Lastly, on the company, we'll get into the topic here. We practice a fiduciary standard. And I would tell you this standard, people have to be careful when they say it, because a lot of financial advisors can be fiduciaries. A lot of attorneys can be, and so can doctors, right? But do you really practice it? And in the fiduciary standard, myself and the advisors that work for me, we have to keep your interest ahead of our own. So maybe you did need life insurance. Maybe I will get paid. We have a conflict of interest. Hey, you bought that policy, but I also qualified for a trip. I'd have to let you know that. So the fiduciary standard is very important. And equally on the board here, right in the middle, if we make a recommendation, it has to have sound foundation. It can't be you should roll over your 401k to me because I can do so much better. It might be true, it might not be. So we need to have sound foundation here before we make recommendations. So we have a nice sized group, Helen. They did show up, even though I was here at 5:30 and I was wondering what's going on. So I thought it started at 6. So I'd urge you to take notes, write down questions. I try to get through here in an hour to keep you out, to be fair to your time. Again, if interested, fill out the evaluation form. It requires an hour of your time and an hour of my time. Some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight, we may struggle to get on to the last one on the estate planning, but I will give you the basics there. We're going to talk about retirement and investment planning, insurance, the role it could potentially play in your life, taxes and the implications. There's a pretty healthy section on that. Helen's had me here a couple of times on taxes. If we're welcome back, I'd love to do that here again. And then your estate and your legacy. So this question has been around forever. And the reason I bring some of these things up is you have to think, in my opinion, when it comes to your money, a little bit outside the box. Growth is great. I used to work on Wall Street, and the terminology is growth is great. The trend is your friend till the end. And it's been so easy in the stock market for the last 10 or 11 years. You should be excited and you should be worried, because I'm doing this for over 30 years and I've never seen a run like this. Never seen artificial intelligence either. But I can also tell you in the last 25 years, we've had some of the most profound market events, which had nothing to do with the market, but it affected the market. We had terrorism, where the stock market was closed. That never happened. We had a banking scandal. We were going to go into a depression, and we somehow got out of that. It had to do with money. We had the first pandemic in 100 years, and you saw the stock market go down about 30% in 6 weeks. So what does retirement mean to you? Financial security and freedom. It's different for everyone. Could be 2 items on here. Being prepared for the unexpected, hitting the bucket list, And I say retirement is a place called peace of mind. I've seen people retire with 125,000. I see people with 7 million that can't retire. And you'd think that's crazy, but try to spend 30,000 a month, and I can tell you that 7 million is not enough. So money has to have a purpose for you, in my interpretation, whether it's for preservation, distribution, growth and accumulation, or again, that peace of mind. These are the common phases of retirement. And for many years, and it's okay right now, I see people get stuck in that first one. That's the growth and accumulation. I'll sit with people on a regular basis, and the first thing I'll say after I look at their statements are you aggressive, moderate, or conservative? No, I'm pretty conservative, except your portfolio doesn't say that. And so the growth is working wonderfully for the last 10 or 11 years. But if you're getting closer to retirement and it's not an exciting phase, you might want to consider preserving a little bit and distributing it. The last phase, when you're gone, is the transfer and the legacy. So retirement and investment planning. Don't laugh when you see this. I'm sure there's a couple of you in the room older than me, so you might appreciate this. The younger ones will say, and you look pretty young, what the heck is that? This woman who I met last year, I'm proud of you for being here again. I told you that when you came last year. Yeah. So retirement has two common possibilities here. Now, you have to envision this three-legged stool, and you could all do this without me. You don't need me for this. And this is one of the foundations that we use to help people determine, do you have enough money? What is the rate of return that you're going to need? Do you have to work longer? All tough things to talk to people about. So in this three-legged stool concept, you have monthly expenses. They sit up on top. You have to prepare for those expenses to go higher due to inflation. You all found out what that was about 2 or 3 years ago when things were going up 9% a year. What holds up that foundation is Social Security and pension or other, and I'll show you what the other can be in a minute. The last leg that holds up your stool for the rest of your life potentially are your savings. And when you look at your own three-legged stool, you have to make decisions here. In the Social Security world, I've given 500 classes on this. Do you take it early? Do you take it late? How long do you have to wait for it to have paid off? What is Social Security? It's a pension. And the question is, do you outlive it? Do you get the most out of it? If you're married or have a significant other, is there survivorship on that pension? So someone waits out to age 70 and they die at 71. Wasn't good for them, but maybe for the spouse, it was a really good move because they inherit the higher of the two. In the pension world, there could be pensions. You have to think, anyone here get a pension, by the way? A couple of you, yeah. The stats say it's about 12% of Americans. So in the pension world, you have decisions to make. Do you get a cost of living? Does it increase every year? Do you have to elect survivorship for a spouse? What do you leave that spouse? Other forms of that pension world could be rental income, annuities, dividends, interest. There's a lot of ways to generate more money, but ultimately you're down to that last leg. And the good news, if your first two legs hold up the stool, you should ask yourself, what is your money for then? Because if you have enough social and enough pension, is your money, again, just for growth? Is it to preserve? What do you want to do with it? But for most people, and what keeps us in business is 80% of the people, the first two legs aren't enough. And so you have to figure out, do you have enough to make that work? How long will the money last is always the big question. I had a woman, it was right around here, Helen, actually. It was another event we had done. And we were talking about retirement planning. And I said, we try to proof these plans out to age 100. And she said, my God, why age 100? I said, because with my luck, you'll live to 101 and you'll have no money left. So you will want to make sure your money lasts out to age 100, even if you don't. Working towards retirement. So 10 years or more, I got plenty of time. Your mindset should be, I want to be in a company retirement plan if my company offers one, particularly if they give me a match. So the age-old theory would be, my company says if I put in 3%, they'll give me 3%. You just made 100%. It has nothing to do with investing. You're doubling your money. So if you can get into a company sponsored plan, if you haven't yet, and they give you a matching feature, you should take advantage of it. Second thing you should be thinking about, do they have a Roth component in there? A Roth IRA is a tax-free version of a pre-tax 401k. The difference is you got to pay your taxes to get in there, but then the growth after that is all tax-free plus the money you put into it. Think if you have 10 years or more, higher risk equals higher reward most of the time. Now you get inside this 10 years and you're thinking about retirement, 5 years, 7 years. It may not sound like a lot of fun, but you might want to think maybe I should dial back my risk because I think I might have enough money here. Because again, those 3 events I told you, if you were super aggressive in any one of those events, at least for a short period of time, you lost 30 to 40% of your money, meaning you have less time to recover if you're wrong. What will your future income needs be? And again, if you have a pension, what are you thinking about doing on the pension? We said with a lot of people who actually have the opportunity to cash out their pension or roll it out into an IRA, sometimes it's a very attractive option. In retirement, if you need income, figure out how you're going to do it. So if you had $300,000 and you said, I need $12,000 a year, don't just assume you're going to make 4% a year and you're just going to take the $12,000. Think about taxes on tax deferred accounts. I've given so many classes on taxes and your retirement. And here's a scary analogy for you. If you have $1 million in your 401k, what do you think it's worth? So many people look to hit that target in their 401k. And I tell people, you have no idea. You haven't taken it out yet. You haven't paid money on that. So the taxes I'll show you in a minute are very important. And when you're figuring back to that 3-legged stool, did you know that 85% of your Social Security can be taxed at your federal income tax rate? So when you're planning your own retirement, make sure you're using the right numbers here. And then the best way to transfer money later on in retirement. So don't wait to plan, make sure you're planning ahead. Now, the good news here, last night when we did this, we were at a brewery. I was telling someone we were at Counterweight in Cheshire. There weren't many people in the room that were 50 or younger. So here we have quite a few, so you might appreciate this. If you're past 50, it won't do much for you, but bear with us, and particularly online as well. So in this case here, I'm going to show you a couple. They're both 50, and I'm going to compare the same couple to age 55. They both want to retire at 65, and they're going to get started here. 401ks, brokerage, savings accounts. They have $450,000 out of the gate, except they're 50 or they're 55. Do you think 5 years would make a big difference? Say yes, otherwise you wouldn't be showing it to us, right? And so here's the difference. We're starting earlier at age 50, and I know some of this is a little small. I apologize. We're working on that. Here's the couple at age 50. And in my software, we have tax calculations going on, IRMA payments for Social Security. We have a lot of different things going on in here. But just follow along the top line because you'll see this type of illustration quite a bit here. And you'll see at age 50, their gross salary is $16,000. The next column is money they're putting into their 401ks, $36.80. And now they have net monthly income of $89.57. That's what's left after taxes and their contributions. You see their expenses are $8,050. So the good news, they got a little extra money every month, about $900, and they're saving for their retirement. If you ever sit with someone else, by the way, I hope they run their retirement the way I do mine. We run this very pessimistically. We're not saying you're only going to make 4 or 5% your whole life, but you want to know based on the money you have that it works at 4 or 5%. And if you're shooting for 8 or 9 or 10, better yet for you. But when someone runs a retirement analysis, make sure it's very conservative. You don't want your plan only to work with your money growing at 10%. Because again, outside of the last 10 years, that's not very likely. So you'll see here their spendable assets, they're going all the way from $450,000 to $2 million because they're going to work until 65 and they started at age 50, and we're going to grow their money again very simplistically. And when we follow along what's going on, now they're in retirement, they're 65 years old, bless you. Something has changed dramatically. Now we only have Social Security for $5,600 a month. How did their expenses go so high? I assumed inflation. That may or may not happen, but now they're spending over $11,000 a month and they're short $6,000 a month. And this is very common because, again, their three-legged stool only has the Social Security. You're starting with over $2 million in that right-hand column. And if you follow out to age 91 here, I don't know if it highlights, but you'll see way down on the bottom, they're left with $1 million. That's a successful retirement plan. They did see their assets come down as they got older, but they still have plenty of money left over and they're 91 years old. Unfortunately, they're at 55 and we have the same $450,000. Nothing has changed here. The same contributions into the 401k, the same expenses, the same positive monthly cash flow while they're working. And when I take them out to age 91, they don't make it. And so the point for the folks in the room that are 50 or younger, you definitely want to get ahead of this. And the hardest part, in many years I worked in the 401k market and I stopped, and I'll tell you a funny story why. Last enrollment I went to, there were a bunch of young people in the back and they were having fun. They just wanted to get away from their desks. They had no interest in enrolling in the 401k. And I tried to engage him and I said, hey, I see you have a Starbucks there. He said, yeah. I said, you pay about $4 or $5 for that? He said, yeah. I said, how about I put a coffee machine in there and you promise to put that money every week into the 401k? And he laughed. And I asked anyone in the room, you bringing lunch every day? Not every day. No, I buy it. Well, nowadays, lunch costs you $15, even if you go to McDonald's, right? So the 401k, if you have that available to you, you really have to try to get disciplined to live on a little bit less, because the sooner you start this, the quicker you can exit. So in this scenario, they started 5 years later, and it didn't work out here. And you'll see in the comparison, it's really pretty stark. Starting at age 50, money goes out to age 99. Starting at age 55, it ends at age 89. So for the folks that are young enough that can appreciate that, that's helpful. A lot of times the hardest advice I give to people when their plan doesn't work, I've fortunately have designed the company where I won't manage someone's money if I don't think it's going to last. I don't see as a person why I should get paid to watch someone go broke. I don't think I could live with that. So here, starting earlier, or spend less, save more, and work longer. Those are really the concepts and the advice I've given people for years. And I actually had someone about 3 years ago, he said, hey, do you remember me? I'd like to come back in. He got an inheritance. And he said, I remember you telling me it wasn't going to work. And he said, but I just inherited $500,000. He said, you did so much for me because I realized I was probably going to have to work longer. And I really started getting aggressive with that. So again, if it doesn't work out for you, run a retirement analysis. The options are spend less, save more, or work longer. Okay. Sequence of returns, really important concept. And the sequence of returns basically says, I'm not a lucky person. I don't gamble. I don't buy lottery tickets. So in my world, in that world, I'm not lucky. Sequence of returns has something that has to do about luck, actually. And sequence of returns basically says, how are you doing if you're living off that money? So what I meant by luck is, with my luck, I retire, I don't get a salary, and the market starts going the other way, all while I'm taking money out. That's a bad combination. So sequence of returns tells you how it can actually potentially deplete your assets. Here we're going to start with an up market, and you're going to see when I open up the other side of the slide, the numbers are exactly the same, they're just reversed. So in this example, there's $100,000. They're going to take out $5,000 a month, and all the gains in the beginning are happy times. That's Pleasantville. They're going to make money every year. They're taking out $5,000, and you're going to scan down to year 15 here, and you're going to say, I should have retired a long time ago. I still have $105,000, and I've been taking out $5,000 every year for the rest of my life. That's a great sequence. On the other side, we're going to take the same numbers and we just flip them upside down. So that's my luck. The market goes down every year, I'm taking out money. And that's kind of a double-edged sword because I'm losing money to my investments, but the market doesn't scare me. I'm always going to hang in there. but I'm also taking out money at that time. And so you'll see here with just the numbers flipped 15 years later, I'm down to $35,000. So when we get into these concepts of income, just make sure if your three-legged plan is short, that you're generating money in a relatively safe manner. It could be CDs that were paying 5% not too long ago. It could be corporate bonds. It could be a lot of things, but just make sure you're not relying on that growth just to pay your bills. Preservation and distribution phase here. So now, in that same software, I'm going to show you someone on the left-hand side who just invests in the S&P because it has been so good. In fact, the last 10-year average is over 15%. The weird thing is the historical average is 8.5%. So again, that should get your attention. And they have $650,000 in savings. In the first example, though, I'm going to expect that they take a 30% hit soon as they retire. That's the unlucky person. On the right-hand side, I'm going to put half the money in the S&P, but I'm going to put half the money in income-producing vehicles. We're just going to call it corporate bonds for tonight. Same life expectancies, 5% rate of return. Helen, I wish I don't give away things at the library because it's not appropriate, but this is kind of a raffle question. But who knows the answer to this one? If this were you and the S&P goes down 30% in 1 year, there's two answers to the question, by the way. Half your money is in this fixed income world and you're earning 6%, and half the money's in the S&P and it lost 30%. How much do you think you lost at the end of the year? You just got to be good at math. I'll give you the answer. On this side of the ledger, half your money earns 6%, so half times 6 is a positive 3. On the other hand side, half your money loses 15%, and that's real. Your total loss for that year is 12%. So in a very bad year in the stock market, for most people, they can deal with that. And that's kind of that preservation distribution phase. Here's the good news. If the stock market goes up 30%, half your money makes 15, the other half makes 3, you made 18%. It's still a really good year. So that preservation and distribution says it's okay to back off a little bit to preserve and distribute to yourself. So in this example, they lost 30% right out of the gate. Again, you can follow across the numbers, the Social Security, the expenses, but they took a hit right out of the gate. I go out to age 90 here, and they still did okay. They leave this lovely earth and they still have 487,000, so they survived that 30% earthquake. And again, that's to show you the market does work over time. You just have to be able to sustain it. And I get news for you because a lot of my clients are getting older and I have younger clients. The older ones don't want to hear that anymore. They don't want to hear it's going to come back. So it's just a wake up for the older people in the room. But in this example, I'm going to use the same couple and I'm going to dial it back a little bit. And I'm going to add in some bonds and dividends from stocks. That's all I'm going to do. Now you'll see I created a new column and it's called cash flow. So our bonds and our dividends are going to pay about almost $1,700 a month. That's pretty steady. That's going to come in every month. And it helps reduce their monthly obligations or that shortfall. So it serves a purpose for them. Now, they didn't start lower because they didn't take that 30% hit out of the gate. So they have a little bit more because they didn't experience that. And when I go out to age 90, they're in a much better place. They're at 731,000. So believe it or not, by de-risking a little bit, if that big event happens, they actually end up in a better place by then having all that exposure. So that's that preservation and distribution phase. I've said this for many years. You can hope the market just keeps going higher like it's been and use your gains to make up for that shortfall in that three-legged stool concept. Or you can invest in safety, and there are, again, multiple ways. I don't solicit people with sales at events, so it can be anything that you like to generate income. But if you have that stool where you're going to need income, don't just assume the gains are going to make up for it. That's called a withdrawal strategy, not an income strategy. Insurance and the role it plays in. There's an interesting, do you have dictionaries here any longer, Helen? Don't know, right? Remember there used to be a dictionary everywhere? If you look in the dictionary, you know what the description is of insurance? Risk management. You know why you all hate insurance? Because you pay for it, you get nothing out of it, right? But if I asked you, oh, do you have car insurance? Well, of course, I have to. Do you have homeowners insurance? Of course, I have to. What do you get out of it? Nothing, thank God, right? So in the insurance world, you have to understand it's hated so much because you pay, and you're not supposed to benefit. If you're fortunate enough to not have a job where you actually have to pay for your health insurance, you're paying $20,000, $25,000 a year. And if you're lucky, you go to the doctor twice a year and take 2 prescriptions and get nothing out of it, right? So, and people struggle with insurance because of that purpose. Does it fit for you though? If legacy is important, it's very helpful. So, hey, I'm going to spend most of my money, and by the time I'm gone, I want to leave something for kids or charity. Well, you need a version of life insurance that's permanent. It could be anything from whole life, universal, it doesn't matter, but you're going to need some form of insurance that gives you a guarantee. If you need income in retirement, yes, there are products that sell people pension-like incomes. If reducing taxes are important, you can utilize insurance. And the last one we're going to talk about briefly here is long-term care, because that can deplete your assets. And this woman's shaking her head, and this is the hardest thing to talk about. And I've been a certified long-term care specialist for 25 years for one reason, because I'm a retirement planner. And if I don't tell you that your plan can blow up if you're wrong on this, then I didn't do my job. I've seen people, wasn't too long ago, it was about 3 years ago, in the Middlebury convalescent home. Husband was 85, the wife was 82. She was healthy. He had dementia, and she had power of attorney. And I was a witness. They got divorced while he's in the nursing bed, so that she could take half the money. So I've seen some really terrible things in this world. I've also seen other people spend down every penny. That person passes away, and the survivor has nothing left. So this is the one we're going to touch on briefly here. But then you do need to consider insurance. And you're going to see in this case study here, I'm going to paint in a hypothetical an event here. They have $900,000 in IRA type money. It's called tax deferred, $300,000 in savings or a brokerage account, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to paint in 4 years of $600,000 in care. Right now, the average cost of nursing home in Connecticut is about $170,000, believe it or not. Yeah, it's terrible. And in this example, again, you know how all the numbers work here. All they did was increase that negative monthly cash flow. So they're going to spend over $12,000 a month just for a long-term care event for 4 years. But hey, that plan was looking good. They had $1.2 million on the top right to start with, and they didn't want to think about long-term care. Because you know why? None of you think you're ever going to end up in the nursing home just like me. I'm not going either. Except every nursing home in the state is full. So for all of us that are not going, someone's in there. Whether it's assisted living, it's a horrible subject, but this has to do with about retirement planning here. And because of that 4-year event, the survivor at age 91, hypothetically, is left with nothing. And I have seen that, sadly. It's not a nice part of my job. In this example, we're actually going to reduce the assets from $1.2 million to $900,000, and they're going to purchase a long-term care policy for $300,000, only because they can afford to in this scenario. That's why it's specific to people. If they never use long-term care, keep your fingers crossed, the money comes back as a tax-free death benefit, as an insurance benefit. And here what they're doing is they're leveraging that successful retirement plan, and they're good for over $12,000 a month in benefits. So now in the next page, you won't see that extra $12,000 a month coming out for 4 years. What you'll see is they're starting with $900,000 instead of $1.2 million. And then when they get old, and knock on wood, as they say, they never use the long-term care, the $300,000 comes back in the plan. And when they retire and they're gone, they got a heck of a lot more money left over. So the reason I chose the long-term care, and I can talk to you about all the other forms of insurance, is I've seen this hurt so many families over time. I've seen children become caregivers, and let me tell you, this is not the flu. This is not a broken ankle. These are things you don't want to do. I just had a client last year. We lost her. She got ALS, and her daughter built a little caregiver apartment for her in Norwalk, and she took care of her for about 2 years. They spent over $400,000 to take care of her. They had mechanical devices taking her out of bed, putting her in the tub. So I'm only so graphic on this because you have to realize it can really affect your plan. So that was a tough one. Okay. Taxes, everyone's favorite topic, right? The reason we talk about taxes, again, back to the structure of the companies, this is really important for you to understand when it comes to your retirement money. Most people are in that first bucket. In fact, if I sat with each one of you, I'd bet 80% of your money or more is there. That was because you were told, don't pay taxes, wait till you retire. They're going to be so much less for you. And 70% of the time, that's not the case. In that first bucket, you have company-sponsored plans. So I call it alphabet soup. Anything with a 4 is a company retirement plan. A TSP is a federal worker. There's so many things in that company-sponsored plan, but basically just think of it as an IRA. It's money you've never paid taxes on. In the taxable bucket, back to the question, what is this money worth? I don't know. You haven't taken it out. I need to know what the tax rate is that time and what other sources of income you have to tell you what it's going to cost to take it out. That center bucket, checking, savings, CDs, brokerage accounts, you name it. That's actually pretty good money, and here's why. If I had $100,000 in that in a CD, do you know the $100,000 is always tax-free? It's the interest on the money that's taxable. So at least I know what that $100,000 is worth. It's just the gains that I get in that money that hit me a little bit. The best bucket of money is in the right-hand column. It's a Roth IRA. It's municipal bonds. For the first time in 20 years, I can talk to people about municipal bonds. They're federally tax-free, and if you buy state bonds, they're state tax-free. And they're paying like 5.5% tax-free. So I see people sit in CDs and savings all the time, and I ask them why. But anyway, I find it interesting. The government only allows 3 options, and the life insurance is a tricky one. But you only have 3 options to get to tax-free to find out what your money's really worth. The reason the life insurance is tricky is because a lot of agents will tell you, hey, you put $50,000 in the first 10 years, and when you get ready to retire, there's $200,000 in there. That might be happening. They might tell you it's tax-free. That's not really true. The $50,000 you put in is tax-free. The gains, if you take it all out, are actually taxed as ordinary income. So what they try to teach you is take loans against the equity in the policy, and that's tax-free. That's almost like a home equity line of credit. You tell the bank to give you $50,000 and they say, no taxes, we're just going to charge you interest. So when you have cash value life insurance, if you're using it as a loan vehicle, as long as you don't deplete the value in there, technically you are getting the money tax-free, but you're paying interest on the money you're borrowing. So understand that one, kind of a tricky one. But ask yourself what percentage of your money is in that bucket. So this is sad, and I love my country. My son served in the military. My daughter-in-law did. My son-in-law is still in the military. He's a naval officer. I love this country, but we're going in the wrong direction here. And it's not a political statement because every president has been part of this and every House and Senate has been part of this. Our tax revenue estimated for 2026, 5.3 trillion. Our spending, 7 trillion. Our shortfall, 1.7 trillion. So all the things that are supposedly going on that's helping us, we're running short still all the time. We currently owe $38.5 trillion as a nation, and you should look at yourself when you go home because you owe it. The government doesn't have the money. They keep borrowing it. So the reason we talk about taxes, back to your 401ks and IRAs, it's not worth what you think it is. And if they change that tax rate, you're going to lose money, and it has nothing to do with investing. How does 7 trillion compare to your household? Well, let's take it in our numbers. We make $74,000 a year. We spend $102,000 a year. We're short $28,000 a year, and we currently owe $564,000. So how would you get out of that? You can't print money, and that won't work forever either. So not pretty, right? Tax quiz. Do you know the highest tax rate ever in this country was 94%? That wasn't on every dollar you made. It's a long time ago, but it did go that high. Did you know as recently as the 70s, it was 70%? That's a little closer to home. Anybody know the highest tax rate today? Yeah. Sounds pretty good now all of a sudden, doesn't it? So for all you say, yeah, I'm paying too much in taxes, don't tell that to the government. It's the lowest tax rate in 75 years, which means when you're borrowing every year and you owe 38 trillion, in my opinion, there's only one direction for taxes. My son created this slide. He likes it. I don't love it, but I left it in because I love him. And basically here, we want you to understand that your money is never really yours unless you're in that tax-free arena. So in this example, you have income and state taxes. You go buy something, you feel good about yourself. You now have a sales tax. You own a home, you have property taxes. You reinvest your money, you have back to that center bucket, dividends and interest. You have a car. I learned 25 years ago when I moved here, you actually, including me now, have to pay a tax to drive my car in this state. I thought that was the stupidest thing ever, and 25 years later, I keep paying that tax. Personal property. You have gas, you go fill up the gas, or you have an EV now, you're paying for that. There's taxes on that. And so what is really left of your money is what you have to start thinking about. This is a 75-year chart of our federal tax system, and I promise you, I studied charts on Wall Street for many years. We have very low tax rates right now. Now, a lot of people will say, and I get it, they're permanent now. The big beautiful bill said those tax rates are permanent. Do you know that any law can be overturned at any time? And so whether you're a Democrat or Republican, someone will come in eventually and say they're too low. And they will get the votes and that thing will be overturned. But I assure you, in your lifetime, that 37% is not permanent. So don't buy into that. Does anyone know the national debt? Well, I just showed you. It's $38.5 trillion. And this is a great slide. I wish I had my pointer. But next to that 38 trillion, it says if everyone in this room that's a taxpayer would write a check for 355,000, we'd be fine. And that's how much trouble the country is in financially. A lot of economists say that can go to $50 trillion. It's not a big deal. And I would ask you, why would you want to owe $50 trillion? Why is the most powerful, richest nation in the world have the biggest debt in the world? It shouldn't sit well with you if your money's never been taxed. If you are a Democrat or a Republican and you're very political, well, join in, because every president for the last 56 years has taken part in this. Now, again, they're beholden to the House and the Senate because that's really who controls the money and they sign off on it. But every president, other than 1 year, which was the terrorism year, has raised that deficit every year. Do you guys know what this is? Anyone taken this yet? So I'm going to help you with the required minimum distribution. You've tax deferred forever. I have this very simple concept, and I said this to a gentleman last night. He said, I get it now. He said, you keep saying tax-free, you keep saying Roth, you keep saying conversion. I said, well, let's back up a second, because you're not really buying into this. If there was a Roth available in your job 35 or 40 years ago, and you said, hey, I'm contributing $25 a week, and I said to you, just pay the taxes and put the leftover in the Roth. Let's assume that was 20 bucks. Would you have done it 40 years ago? If I said it's only going to cost you $5 a week, but now that $20 is going to grow tax-free forever, you all would have done it. But instead they said, no, pre-tax it. So what you did is the opposite. You took the 25 and you keep allowing it to build for 30 and 40 years. Now you're going to pay taxes on the back end, plus the growth. In this required minimum distribution world, I'm going to give you an example. I'll use a big number to give you the example. You're 73 years old. For just about everyone except for the couple ones that are younger, it's 75 for you. You're going to be forced to take money out of your retirement accounts. If you had $1 million, that means you'd have to take 37,700 out. If that's what you needed for retirement, do you think you figured this out right? The answer is no, because it's not worth 37,000. You have to pay the taxes first. Depending on the tax rate, you might have to take out 50,000. You should really be aware of that. The flip side, if you're fortunate and you don't need it, don't wait until you're 73. And those are some of the concepts I'll show you. We have a progressive tax system. And to give you an example here, I sit with people regularly and they say, hey, I'm in the 24% tax bracket. I think some people believe that that's what they really pay on all their money. But a progressive system says every level you pay a little bit more taxes. So as an example, single, 0 to 12,400, I pay 10% on that total. 12,400 to 50,400, I pay 12% on that. So you're never really in the 24%. In that example, as a single person, it's the 105 to the 201. Does that make sense? Okay. What you want to focus on to be tax efficient, oh, I think I lost it, is an effective tax rate, and I hope it comes up in a second. Here's a case study for a gentleman, and I don't recommend this, but he actually did do this. This is a little extreme. He said to me, and I'm a big fan of Jack Reacher on Prime Video, so we called him Mr. Reacher. 66 years old, he's retired. He said, Mike, I'm buying into these conversions. I'm going to take my money from my IRA. I'm going to pay the taxes. I'm going to put it all in the Roth. And I said, Mr. Reacher, that's a little aggressive, but he went ahead and did it. And here's what he said, and he actually helped me, and this is why this is in the presentation. Here's what his take was. 66 years old, 25% effective tax rate, meaning that's what it was going to cost him on all the money. And he said, well, the taxes I'm going to pay are $164,000. If I keep the IRA and I live out to age 90, I'm going to pay taxes of about $164,000 if they never raise the tax rates. The taxes are going to be on the reinvested money because he didn't need it. So remember, once you take a required minimum distribution, if you didn't need the money, you would probably reinvest it. Back to that center bucket, that's where you're going to trigger capital gains, dividend, interest type income. He said, well, I'm going to assume another $67,000 and then taxes paid on the remaining account value at death to his heirs. In his example, he's going to pay $338,000 if he does not convert that IRA. What he wound up doing is paying 25% taxes on the $500,000, $125,000, and he will never pay taxes on that money again. So that's a real shock to the system, but that's what he actually did. And he said 125 is a lot better than 338. And I can't argue with him on that. In the conversion world, if you didn't know this, whether you're working or not, you can convert money. You can take money from an IRA, 401k, pay the taxes, and then move it into a Roth. A lot of the 401k companies will actually allow you to do that now. But if you have your own IRAs, you can do it freely. The only thing you have involved in the middle is a tax man. When you take money out of an IRA and you want to get it into the tax-free Roth, you just got to pay the taxes. So in this example here on the left-hand side, they're both 65, $975,000 of tax-deferred type money, $200,000 in bank money or brokerage money, whatever you want to call it. On the right-hand side, I'm going to show you in a minute, I'm just going to convert some of that money and pay the tax man, and I'll show you what a difference it makes. So again, in this scenario, they are very fortunate. Back to that three-legged stool, that net monthly cash flow, they have positive monthly cash flow. So they don't need to live on those retirement savings. So they were very interested in doing this here. We have their pension and we have their Social Security, and their money just keeps making 5%. And I don't think there's one of you in the room that would say, when you leave this earth at 90 years old, you got $4.2 million. There's nothing wrong with that, right? And that is a very successful plan. There's no doubt about it. Here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some conversions. And so you see in this column here, I'm going to convert 120,000 a year from a IRA type vehicle, could be a 401k. I'm going to pay the tax man, and I'm going to put it in a tax-free Roth and grow it tax-free forever. And you may notice later on, I reduced it down to 25 because that's when he's got required minimum distributions, and we don't want to overdo it. We don't want to create too much taxes. So that's all I'm doing. I'm converting money from an IRA, paying the taxes, and allowing it to grow in a tax-free Roth account. And if you're all paying attention, you would say, you didn't accomplish anything. You have the same $4 million there in the right-hand column. What did you accomplish? Remember, I said the tax software does a lot of different things. What I accomplish is, if the tax rates never changed, I save them $500,000 in taxes over their lifetime, just by doing those conversions. They were looking at 1.4 million in lifetime taxes if they lived out to age 90. We got it down to about 960,000. More importantly, and I can try to blow this up for you, in their strategy here, they have no Roth money, but they are going to leave a wonderful legacy. Again, no one would complain about that, but most of it's going to be taxable. In our strategy here, we're going to get them up to about $3 million of tax-free money for their kids, and that's what was important to them. So no comparison in the tax world, and we do, like I said, a lot of tax planning for people. All right, last section. I promised to keep this short. We're a little over. Oh, actually pretty close, Helen. So some statistics, if this is important to you, and again, not everybody falls in this camp, so bear with me, but have you started a wealth transfer plan? Because again, if you're planning to last out to age 100, even if you don't, there will be some form of estate. There will be money for someone. So we're looking at it this way, and one of the great times to be in this business, it's called a great wealth transfer. Baby boomers are getting older, they're coming of age, and they're estimating it's about $84 trillion that's going to get transferred to the next generation. Talk about a great time to raise taxes. In the next 20 years, if the government wants a free ticket, they could just raise taxes by 10% and get themselves about $8 trillion. So we're in this business knowing that this is going to happen, and if you are going to leave money to the next generation, there's ways to deal with this here. What is an estate plan? It's about managing assets while you're alive to avoid unnecessary taxation and planning a distribution method for yourself and ultimately when you're gone. And so basically, you want to create a set of documents outlining your wishes regarding your assets. Again, back to that terrible long-term care scenario, cognitive is a big one. I had a client, so sad. Right after COVID, the woman calls me, and the husband was the breadwinner. She stayed home with the kids, which is a harder job than making the money, I can tell you, because when my wife died 20 years ago, I had to do both. And she says, hey, I really need to meet you. I don't think Jim is right, and I'm getting worried. And they never did any estate planning. Go to meet him in the Norwalk office. At the time, I had a Norwalk office, and Jim, and I came out, and I says, hey, guys, I'm going to be about 15 minutes late. And Jim says, don't worry about it, Mike. We're fine. Take your time. 15 minutes later, I came out and got Jim and Kathy, go sitting down in the office. We're talking. Jim's not saying anything because she hadn't told me it was wrong, but he knew it wasn't right. And Jim looks at his wife and says, why are we talking to this guy about our money? And I'm like, I just saw him 15 minutes ago. And he said, hey, Mike, that's how bad his cognitive thing was. The reason you want to get this stuff going, even if you're not at that point yet, she didn't have a power of attorney. And he was going around downtown buying people for things. He was a happy person with dementia. And he'd see on the street, go, would you like something today? And a lot of people took him up on it. $80,000 later, he was draining money out of the accounts. And then I had to get a lawyer for her that paid $500 an hour to petition the probate court. So you want to create a set of documents outlining your wishes on your assets and your belongings. You want to figure out who manages your affairs if you become incapacitated like he did. How do you distribute your assets, to whom and when? And who takes care of minor children, unfortunately, if that happens and you pass away too soon? And so really the basis of estate planning, and I kept this short for tonight, and we do full events on estate planning if you wanted to do that as well, Helen. What are the basics? And I'm going to give you, if any of you are an attorney in the room, don't get offended. I have very simple terminology. I don't want to use that terminology which scares people, like a codicil. You know, what's a codicil? To me, that's an amendment, right? Or change. Anyway, a will basically says this is your ticket to probate court. If you have probatable assets, so anything in the IRA world, you have a named beneficiary, so you bypass the probate court. You have a life insurance policy, it has a named beneficiary. You don't need the probate court. You need a death certificate of proof of who you are. But you have a brokerage account, you have checking, you have savings, you have cars, you have a home. These are all probatable assets. The will gets you into the probate court. It tells the judge what you're looking for, and the judge decides after they release the information at a certain period of time, you can get the money. Wills can be contested, but at least the judge has an idea. If you don't have a will, you'd be surprised back in the day when there were newspapers, how many people would show up court saying, I'm a long lost loved one. I need to be taken care of here. So a will gets you in the probate court. It's a $300 to $400 document. You should all have that. Power of attorney, back to Jim, and healthcare proxy. Power of attorney basically says, no, Jim, you shouldn't be giving away money to people. And she could have stopped him right away. She could have called all those accounts and said, do not allow him to take money out of the account. Very powerful document because people can access your money while you're alive. So make sure it's someone that you trust, not your spouse that you get into a bad fight in and take money out of your account. Living will, healthcare proxy. Sadly, I lived that when my wife was sick. I debated with her family about treatments and stuff, but ultimately I had the right to make the decision, not as her spouse, but as the person who had, bless you, the healthcare proxy. And what is a trust? A trust is a little bit more complicated. A trust helps you to avoid the probate. So those probatable assets are not public any longer. They're in a private document. They're going to cost you in the thousands of dollars. They're not cheap. But believe it or not, the probate court still oversees the trusts. It's just that your information is not public. It's also harder to contest a trust than it is to contest a will. My terminology on the trust is my wishes from the grave. So again, excuse the terminology, but I have a trust, I have 2 kids, I have 4 grandchildren, and I'm gone, and I still want to control the flow of the money when I'm gone. I could do that in a trust. Can't do it in a will. Once I die and it clears probate, the money's free and clear. The reason you might do that, you might have a child that's not in the right place at that time. You might not like their spouse. There's a lot of reasons for trust if that falls into your life. Basic definitions of estate plan, that's what I just went over. State and federal estate taxes. The one good news with the new estate tax laws is that you have to be super wealthy to actually have to pay federal or state estate taxes. Connecticut is one of 12 states that can still tax your estate. I don't know what we're waiting for. On the federal level, you have to have $14 million above that to start getting taxed on the federal level, and you could be taxed up to 40%. The state follows the federal law, and it's also $14 million. So I'm sure we don't have to spend a lot of time on that. More importantly, back to taxes, think about what kind of legacy you're leaving. Qualified money, again, is in that alphabet soup, the IRA world. I leave someone $100,000, that's not what it's worth. If you didn't know this, another way the government came after the next generation is, unless you're leaving money to a spouse or someone less than 10 years younger than you, or someone disabled, they have to liquidate those accounts in 10 years. So you leave someone $100,000, they have 10 years to liquidate the account. Not a great deal. It's a great way to tax the next generation. Taxable money, think about your home. You bought a home for $300,000, it's worth $600,000. You die, they inherit it at the $600,000. They don't pay any taxes. If you wanted low-hanging fruit, that's a good one to go after. Because your parents probably bought homes for $30,000, and then they sold them, or when they pass, it's worth $500,000. That's a great way for the government to generate more money. But taxable money, basically, you get this thing called a stepped-up basis. Your mother bought Apple when it was $10, and she bought it for $10,000, and it's worth $1 million. You inherited at $1 million, you pay no taxes. Tax-free money, great. Leave tax-free legacy. And lastly, figure out where your money is and get it into that right arena if the estate and legacy is important to you. All right, Helen, I did it exactly in an hour. Thank you. Just in time for me losing my voice. Certainly, if you didn't want to hand in the evaluation, and by all means, I always thank Bethel and all the libraries I speak at just for coming and having me here. But if you did want to hand it in, you can hand it to me, put it upside down for privacy. If you wanted to wait time, you can call me. You can send an email to our admin email. That's not my email. You're welcome to do that as well. So with that, Helen, if we have time for questions, whether they're online or in the audience, I'm happy to answer them as well. Do you want to start there first?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, yes.
Good question. It's I think the living trust which we continue working part of the describing those things.
Yeah.
All those things. But most of these banks in the brokerage at home really give you which you can put very quickly on
Transfer on death.
So it's then needed because they say whatever is in the account beneficiary, that basically located everything. That the bills or anything, you already put somebody in the beneficiary. So that is.
You asked me the question, so I'm going to answer to you honestly. Why do I have a trust? So before I had grandchildren, I made sure my son-in-law, who I love, he's a naval officer, my daughter-in-law, who is a Marine sergeant that works for Microsoft, was in on the meeting. And I said, look, I have this trust for my kids to keep you two away from the money. And my kids almost attacked me at the meeting. And I said, I wanted them here for a reason. I have language in that trust where the kids can't take it out immediately, but they can for medical emergency, financial hardship, a lot of different reasons, maybe first time ownership, but they own their homes now, so that's off. I want them to leave it in there and compound it. That's what I teach people, but they can take money out if need be, like the movie Author with Dudley Moore from 30 years ago. You also do a trust because it becomes an irrevocable gift. So this is a revocable living trust. It becomes an irrevocable gift upon my passing, meaning if the kids leave the money in the trust and then they get divorced, and that's why I wanted my son-in-law and daughter in there, who I love, they can leave the money in the trust and it's not part of a divorce proceeding. So I told the kids, leave the money in the trust. You want to take some out and share it with your spouses and I'm gone, do that. But for your protection, and by the way, it doesn't have to be divorce. My son-in-law can get to, God forbid, a car accident and injure someone if it's in her name in the trust. So the trust is about the next generation. It's not for you. A revocable living trust does absolutely nothing for you. You're the executor, you control the money. And if you get into litigation or you go into a nursing home, it gives you zero protection. You're doing it because of the next generation, if that's important. Yes? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if that's appropriate for tonight, but spendthrift trust, charitable remainder trust, they're all valuable type of vehicles. They're also very specific vehicles. There's generational trusts that are effective. We've done a lot of that work. And that's where I usually bring in the attorneys because the reason I've sat in those meetings for my clients, I don't get paid for it. I don't want to get paid. Again, it's that added value we're trying to offer. But I want to make sure that, and if you're an attorney, please don't take this the wrong way, they're very good at estate law, elder care law, divorce law, tax law. I deal with a lot of tax attorneys as well, but they're not great at the financial instruments. So without knowing the objective for the money and the generation, it's a little tough to comment on it. So a little bit more advanced, obviously, but I appreciate the question. Yes?
If I have my own Roth IRA
Mhm.
and I want to maximize.
Yep.
And I also have a 401k at work that allows to grow.
Right.
Then I don't.
So the good news in the 401k Roth, you're not subject to income limitations. So if you opened up a Roth with me and you made too much money, can't even open it for you. Can't contribute to it. In the 401k in the outside world, because you're young, you get to contribute a certain amount in the outside world. In the 401k, you can contribute whatever the maximum 401k contribution is for your age. So you could put so much more in the Roth in your 401k, not subject to income, versus you go to Fidelity and open up a Roth, you're subject to income and how much you put into it. So you're much better off maximizing the Roth 401k. Any contributions they give you matching will always go in the pre-tax because they want to take advantage of the tax savings for the company. But yeah, you should maximize that one first. Yes, in the 401k. Yes? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because I know because I'm which age you're gonna be doing, what you're gonna be doing at the time.
Right.
It's gonna be exactly the future. Or which is at the time of.
The required minimum distribution in Medicare, yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, so in the tax planning world, I wish it were linear, so I'm not trying to be evasive, but tax planning goes on every year, and here's one of the reasons. Typically, when you retire, if you hold off on social and you only have a small pension, that's a great time to live off of tax deferred money at lower tax rates. I'll give you an example. I had a couple, it wasn't too long ago, and they wanted to delay Social Security. And I was an advocate of that because they had enough money. Well, guess what? The first $32,000 they took out of their 401k that year, because they had no income, that's tax free. When did you ever think you could take money out of your 401k tax free? Their standard deduction offset it. Then back to that progressive scale, then they took out 24,000 and only paid 10%. So now they had $56,000 and they paid almost no taxes. In the conversion world, you want to find the sweet spots and you want to do this systematically over time so that it proofs out over time you really saved versus that gentleman who did the $500,000 at once. I didn't think that was a great idea, but he was done with it. But typically it's when the income slows down. You also want to get ahead of that age 73. So those are kind of the answers. The hardest part and the reason it's not linear is, and someone was here, was at Michael's, and the guy almost fell off his chair when he asked me this question. Imagine you had $1 million and you would convert 10% a year and you never made any money. Well, in 10 years, you're done, right? 100,000 a year. Here's the good news. If you made 10% a year, you still have $1 million in the IRA because you're converting 100,000 and it's growing at 100,000. Now, here's the hard part that he struggled with. I said, if you buy the S&P and it's down 30%, you have 700,000. That's when I'd convert 300,000. My God, why would you do that? I said, because then I'm almost done with all the IRA money. He didn't understand that. So there's no simple answer to it because it depends on how the money's growing, what you need, when you turn on other sources of income. But usually the sweet spot is when you retire. But depending on what you make, you could do some internally in the 401k now. You're welcome.
Or when start for
Long-term care is typically appropriate in the 50s, 60s, kind of pushing it. But it's, here's the hard part with that question. And again, I try to be very thorough in my answers. There's never a bad time, and here's why. You buy it when you're 70 and you pay $12,000 a year and you say, what a waste of money. It's the best peace of mind you ever bought, back to what insurance is. Because if you're wrong on it, just 1 year, you're going to pay 150 or 200,000. You could have paid for that policy for 15 years. So usually 50, 55, 60, and then you hope you just pay premium at a much lower rate and never use it ever, or you pay for 30 years and then you start using it. So typically the sweet spot about 50. But you know what happens when you're 50? You're getting kids through college. You finally got the second car. One's a Mercedes. You got a boat in the driveway. You got all these things going on. And you're thinking, I can't pay $5,000 a year. I'll talk to Mike and then it'll be $12,000 a year. You know what also happens when you get older and you're young? Things start happening. Yeah, your body breaks down. You got joint replacement, you got, you're diabetic, there's so many things going on. And now the insurance company says, yeah, I wish you would have called me 20 years ago. I'd have been happy to collect your money. Now we don't want your money. So the decline ratio in the long-term care world is 35% of the applicants get declined. So, but wait a while. So, anyone else? Yeah, sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yep.
If you're in conversation with any social, probably this is mine will carry and stuff.
Yeah, and so so it's a funny question because I've heard a lot of questions over the years, and I was in the Saybrook Point Inn about 6 months ago, and this gentleman in the back was just not in a good mood. I would say he was about 78 or 80, and he says, "You keep saying Roth. Who says they're not going to tax the Roth?" And I said, "I got to keep this light because that's my personality." So I said, "Imagine you and your son, you and your friend, you're way back your kids, you're on the farm." You want to go get some lemonade. You're thirsty. It's hot out. He's like, "What the hell are you talking about?" He said to me. I said, "Just stay with me for a little bit." I said, you're thirsty. You got to get back to the farm. It's a mile and a half away. It's 90 degrees. And you, your friends are walking back, and there's an orange tree. And on the bottom, there's oranges. You could just reach up and grab them. The nicest ones are up top. Are you going to climb that tree to go to the top, or are you just going to take the ones on the bottom because you're thirsty? That's the government. $84 trillion of money that's never been taxed. You know how much is in Roth? $2 trillion. There's no reason to go to the top of the tree just yet. No, I don't think they're going to do it, because then why would you have a Roth? There's so much other money, your salary, your Social Security, your pensions, your IRAs. That's the low-hanging fruit. I wouldn't worry about that at all. Not yet. Yes. For non-spousal inheritances of IRAs and 401ks. So the laws on the exceptions are a spouse to spouse. There's no 10-year rule, and I'll explain the 10-year rule. A beneficiary is 10 years or less younger than you. So you leave it to a brother who's 5 years younger than you, as an example, no 10-year rule. And is a disabled or chronically ill person, there's no 10-year rule. Outside of that, you leave an IRA or 401k to a child, and here's the example I always use because my kids are about 30 years younger. I pass in my 80s, they're in their 50s. My hope is they're making more money than they ever did, and now they get 10 years to liquidate my $1 million. They don't want to do that. They're making too much money. So they work 5 or 6 more years, the million goes to $1.5 million, and now they only have 4 years to liquidate it. They're going to pay the highest tax rate. And that was the goal behind that plan. In that 10-year rule was usually that span between parents and kids, 25, 30 years. You're hoping they're working, making money. You're gone. They don't want to liquidate it. It continues to grow. And now that window is dialing down on when they have to liquidate that account. Even with the Roth IRA, it has to be liquidated. Now, the good news, and here's the flip side. If my kids, and I have less than 35% of my money tax deferred, I'd rather pay my taxes now personally. If I leave them $1 million in a Roth, I've already told them, wait 10 years. Why, Dad? Because in 10 years, it might be worth $2 million, and now you take out the whole $2 million tax-free. But in the tax-deferred IRA, they're going to want to liquidate that thing right away. So, yeah, that's the 10-year rule. So, spousal, less than 10 years or younger, and the disabled or chronically ill. So, make sense? Not to me, it doesn't make sense, but that's the law. That's what I should say. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it makes sense. No, I know why they did it. Because again, it's the baby boomers are getting older. They're going to pass some of that money on. And the government thinks in decades, not next year. That's why Social Security's got about 7 years before it's in trouble. No one's going to touch that thing now. Be out of office by then. Let someone else worry about that. So 6 months before they're telling you you're going to get 80% of your benefit, well then, we're going to shut down the government. We're going to hash this thing out. And it's going to cost you more. So your kids are working, and instead of paying 6.2% for Social Security, they're going to pay 8%. Here's one of my ideas how to save it, right? Now go tell your kid Social Security is 8%. They're gonna say, what's Social Security? What's coming out of your check now? Oh yeah, I'm never getting that anyway. It doesn't make a difference. There's a lot of easy fixes, but they're not gonna deal with it now. So, anyone else? Okay. Target funds are good. So her question on target funds, when you want a target fund, you want you're too young to know what an hourglass is. Do you know what an hourglass is? Right. So back in the day, to keep time, they had hourglasses. It's sand glass, right? So you'd flip it over and it was an hour or 2 hours, whatever the heck it was. The target fund does that for you. If you say 2050, well, all the sand is on top and it's very unstable. You bump into it, you'll knock it over. As you get closer to 2050, all the sand's on the bottom and you could bump right into that thing. You're not going to knock it over. The target fund, the downfall is it doesn't have a brain. What does that mean? Well, when COVID hit, the target fund said, what do you care? You have until 2050. It doesn't react. So if you don't like to manage money and you get reactionary, own a target fund is the best way to look at it. And it will dial down the risk as you get older. Or put some of the money in the target fund, put some of the money in an aggressive fund. You don't have to do all of anything, but that's what a target fund is. It works very well, it keeps time very well, but it doesn't react to politics or events. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Helen.
Don't